January 2024, a federal judge blocked a $3.8 billion merger specifically to keep Spirit Airlines alive and independent, protecting its low fares from disappearing into a bigger airline. 16 months later, Spirit filed for bankruptcy anyway. 9 months after that, it filed for bankruptcy a second time. By May 2026, it was gone completely. Every flight grounded, every route shut down. The cheapest major airline in America erased from the map. The merger was blocked to protect Spirit. Spirit didn't survive being protected. The deal that was supposed to save it. By 2022, Spirit was already struggling. It reported a $36 million loss in the third quarter of that year and a $270 million loss in the fourth. Real mounting losses at a company that had spent years growing quickly, but never quite building the financial cushion a downturn would require. In July 2022, JetBlue announced a $3.8 billion deal to acquire Spirit outright, promising to fold it into a bigger airline with the scale to actually compete against giants like Delta and United. It would have created the fifth largest airline in the country. Spirit's own leadership called it a chance to build the strongest low-fare challenger the industry had seen in years. A way out of exactly the financial pressure the company was already feeling. Blocked on purpose, regulators saw it differently. In March 2023, the Department of Justice sued to stop the deal, arguing it would raise fares and shrink options for exactly the travelers who relied on Spirit's rock-bottom prices. The case became one of the most closely watched antitrust fights in the airline industry in over a decade. In January 2024, District Judge William Young agreed and blocked the merger outright, writing a 109-page opinion that took Spirit's value to its customers seriously, noting that Spirit was a small airline, but one with genuinely dedicated riders who depended on it. The court's reasoning was direct. Absorbing Spirit into JetBlue would mean converting Spirit's cheap seats into JetBlue's higher-priced ones, and cost-conscious travelers would be the ones who paid for it. The Justice Department treated the ruling as a clear win. JetBlue paid Spirit a $69 million breakup fee for walking away from the deal, on top of roughly $425 million in prepayments it had already sent Spirit's way while the merger was still pending. On paper, Spirit walked away from the wreckage of the deal with real cash in hand. Was it really the merger block? Here's a fair objection. Maybe the merger block didn't kill Spirit at all. Spirit was already flying into serious headwinds before the ruling. A defect in Pratt & Whitney engines had forced roughly a quarter of Spirit's fleet out of service for inspections, grounding planes the airline needed to fly to make money. Low-cost airline margins across the entire industry were shrinking. Spirit's own board reportedly understood the antitrust risk when they agreed to the JetBlue deal in the first place and accepted that risk because the alternative, staying independent with weak fundamentals, looked worse. That's a real and fair point. Spirit's problems didn't start in a courtroom, but the merger block removed the one option that might have absorbed those problems into a larger, more stable airline at the exact moment Spirit had the least room left to absorb them alone. The ruling didn't create the weakness. It took away Spirit's only exit from it. And here's the part that makes the whole episode worth sitting with. The merger was blocked specifically to protect Spirit's low fares for consumers. Once Spirit collapsed anyway, those fares didn't survive either, because the airline offering them didn't survive. Protecting competition and protecting a specific competitor turned out to be two different things, and only one of them was actually in anyone's control. Paid to stay 3 times. If this pattern feels familiar, it should. 2 episodes ago, we covered Circuit City, a company that fired its most experienced employees to cut costs while its executives collected 6-figure retention bonuses months later. Spirit ran a version of that same pattern. Not once, but 3 separate times, each one closer to the end. Just days before its first bankruptcy filing in November 2024, Spirit's board approved $5.4 million in retention bonuses for 5 executives. 10 months later, on the same day it filed for bankruptcy a second time, Spirit disclosed retention bonuses of over $1 million each for 4 top executives. Its stock fell 45% that same afternoon. And in May 2026, as Spirit shut down every remaining flight for good, the company asked a bankruptcy court to approve $10.7 million in retention payments to the employees still left, plus an undisclosed additional amount for its top 3 executives, just to keep enough staff around to liquidate what remained of the airline. 3 separate moments where the company was collapsing, and 3 separate moments where leadership secured its own payout on the way down. No warning at all. Federal law requires companies to give workers advance notice before mass layoffs. Spirit didn't. The legally required WARN Act notices went out only after the shutdown had already happened, and the company's own court filing gave the reason plainly. Publicizing the layoffs earlier would have hindered its efforts to secure additional funding. In other words, the company judged that keeping its own workers in the dark was worth more than giving them time to prepare. The Spirit ceased all flight operations on May 2, 2026, after a last attempt to secure a federal government rescue fell through. Court filings described it bluntly. Spirit had fought valiantly for months to reorganize, had come close to succeeding, and simply ran out of road. The airline didn't even have enough cash left to run a structured sale of what remained. 131 aircraft, most of them leased rather than owned outright by major banks like Wells Fargo, meaning the planes themselves weren't even Spirit's to sell freely. Roughly 10,000 employees lost their jobs. A discount airline that had, at its peak, made flying affordable for millions of people who couldn't otherwise afford it was gone, less than 2.5 years after a judge ruled that losing it would hurt exactly those travelers most. The lesson: protecting something from one specific threat doesn't protect it from every threat. Regulators moved to shield Spirit from a single acquisition they believed would hurt consumers, and that reasoning wasn't unfounded. But it treated the merger as the danger, when the deeper danger was a company already running out of runway, with or without that deal. You can win the fight you were focused on and still lose the war nobody was watching. And once again, the fastest way to see what a company's leadership actually expects is to watch who gets paid to stick around right before everyone else finds out how bad things really are. Spirit's executives collected retention bonuses 3 separate times on the way to zero. Nobody does that unless, on some level, they already know where this is heading. Next time, a company that once controlled an entire industry before its actual disruptor even had a name for what it was building, and dismissed that disruptor for years, right up until it was too late to matter. Subscribe if you want to see the pattern before it repeats.